My name is Ms. Connolly. I started making some math videos for my own students and decided that it would be great to get some videos out there to keep everybody learning during this crazy time. So if you have a math topic you want me to cover, please email connollymathathome@gmail.com and be sure to like, share, and subscribe so we can get as many kids learning as possible. Parents, I hope this is helpful to you. We learned math a long time ago, first of all, and secondly, it was a lot different than how we're learning today. So I want to get as much help out there as possible. Today, during this video, we're going to talk about some subtraction strategies. I teach in Massachusetts, so these strategies are taught starting in first grade, actually, the end of first grade, then in second grade, and then in third grade we move to 3-digit minus 3-digit, and we also refine these strategies in fourth grade, and then you learn the US standard algorithm for subtraction. I have a video about that already. I don't just teach the steps, I teach the understanding, so make sure to check that out so you understand what's going on when you use the standard algorithm. So let's get started on some other subtraction strategies. So up here we have 451 minus 287. The first thing I'm going to go over is keeping this number whole and subtracting this number in parts. Now, when we subtract, we want to make sure that we keep this number whole because you're going to end up with situations like this. So I did addition videos where we add by place value, but if we're subtracting by place value and we break up both numbers, you end up in situations like this. And we're not going to be able to keep track of the negatives and everything like that in third and fourth grade, so we want to make sure that we're not doing that when we're trying to subtract. So let's look at what we should be doing. What we should be doing is keeping 451 whole and subtracting this number in parts. So when we subtract in parts, a really good way to think about subtracting in parts is by place value. So if we start with 451 and we subtract 287 in parts by place value, we're going to be thinking about subtracting the hundreds first. So we have two groups of 100 here, so we're going to subtract that. Why? Because we know that subtracting groups of 100 is simple because there's a 0 in the tens place and a 0 in the ones place. So when we are subtracting over here, the tens place and the ones place are not going to change. We're just going to be subtracting 4 groups of 100 minus 2 groups of 100. So 4 groups of 100 minus 2 groups of 100 is 2 groups of 100, and the 51 stays the same. And we can show this on the number line. Make sure if you're subtracting, you're moving backwards on the number line. Okay, you should be starting over here and coming backwards. So we land on 251. So this represents 451 minus 200 is 251. Next, we're going to go up here. We have 251, as you know, and we're going to subtract the groups of 10. So we know that the ones place is going to be left alone because of our friendly digit in the ones place in 80. And we're going to be thinking about 251 minus 80. So some students feel comfortable switching from 200s to 100s in their brain. Some students might want to do this in additional steps. So I'm going to show you on the number line an additional step. So if I subtract 50 first, then I'm getting to 201. So I've subtracted 250. I know that my next step had to be 80 total, so I'm going to subtract 30 more. So now, for students who are jumping from 251 to 201, it feels a little easier for them to go from 201 minus 30 instead of doing it all 80 at once. So here I tried to get to as friendly of a number as possible, and that's why some students might be jumping there. Okay, so we get ourselves to 171. You can see here I've subtracted 200, I've subtracted 80, so far I've subtracted 280. I'm at 171, and you can see it down here as well. The last thing that we're going to do is subtract the ones, so I'm going to go with 171, that's where I left off, minus 7, and students might think of this as minus 1, minus, oh, that's way too big, minus 1, minus 6 more. So they might get to 170, so that it's easy for them to get to 164. Or your student might feel comfortable going 171 minus 7 all at once, which gets them to 164. So let's talk about where we see our final answer in this strategy, because all the strategies, our answer might be in a different place, and you have to keep track of what's going on. So in this strategy on the number line, I started with 451. I subtracted 287, and where I landed was 164. That's where I ended up. Up here, I started with 451. I subtracted 200, I subtracted 80, I subtracted 7, and where I end up is 164. So in this strategy, we have to keep track of where our answers are because it's about to change really quick. So let's take a look at another strategy. This one was keeping the first number whole and subtracting 287 by place value. All right, moving on to another strategy. When we think about subtraction, we're trying to find the difference between two numbers. So we're trying to find the distance between 287 and 451. So when we think about the distance between these two numbers, the distance between these two numbers, we're thinking about how far is it from 287 to 451. So if I counted by ones, which we're never going to do, I would find the difference between these two numbers. So there's another way we can think about this equation. Well, there's two other ways we can think about this equation. We can think about it as 451 minus what gets us to 287. So 451 minus how much will land us at 287? Or a really fun strategy for subtraction is to use adding up. So we might think about it as 287 plus what will land us at 451. So that would look like if I start at 287, what can I add, what can I add, what can I add, what can I add, until I get to 451. So we might see students start to do this, parents, and it's okay. They're being flexible with numbers. I love it. All right, so let's think about subtracting back first. I'm going to erase this for a second so I have space. Let's subtract back. So, when we are subtracting back, you can do a variety of strategies. Okay, your student might want to subtract until hundreds, they might want to subtract just a 1, they might want to jump to landmark numbers. I'm going to show you all how it goes down. Okay, so when I think about 451 here, I don't super love that there's a 1 in the ones place. I don't want to keep track of the ones place. Don't want to at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 1 and get to 450. Now I've made a number that I feel a little bit more comfortable working with. Then I'm thinking, well, I wouldn't mind if I had a 0 in the tens place as the digit in the tens place, or a 0 as a digit in the ones place. So I'm going to next subtract 50. Now I've gotten to 400, which is one of my favorite numbers to work with because I know how to get to 400 and I know how to travel from 400. Okay? Your student might be thinking, Miss Conley, why didn't you just subtract all 51 at once? And you can do that too. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 100. That gets me to 300. That was easy. It didn't require much thinking from me. And now I'm thinking, what is the distance here? I know if I wanted to go to 290, that's 10 away. And I know that 287 is 3 more away from 290. So my last jump is minus 13. So we have to think about where our answer is. I'm wondering, what is the distance between 451 and 287? So I started at 451. I ended at 287. I was thinking about what's the distance between them. So in this strategy, my answer is the total distance between the two numbers. The total distance between the two numbers. Okay, so when I think about the total distance, we can combine these numbers in any order that we want. I see 150, 163, 164. Or I can go right in order. 1 plus 50 is 51, plus 100 is 151, plus 13 is 164. So we're finding that we got the same answer, but this time we did it by determining the distance between the two numbers. And I subtracted back in parts. I thought about parts that were meaningful to me, so that I could work with these, what we call landmark numbers, the numbers that are multiples of 10, 100, and later on 1,000, 10,000, anywhere. We want to see these smiley faces we can draw on the zeros. Okay, so that is subtracting back on the number line. I want to show you with equations too, so you can see where your answer is there. So because I have a board that I bought for 5 to 7-year-olds, it's very small, so I have to erase that. So if I'm starting at 451, parents, I talked about you can jump back all the way to 400 all at once. So you can subtract 51 and you're at 400. Okay, remember I'm trying to find the distance between 451 and 287. So I'm subtracting back to see how much I have to subtract back to get to 287. Next, I'm going to say, all right, well, I know how to do 100 at a time. That's easy. So far, I've subtracted 151. I've gotten from 451 to 300. Now I'm going to say to myself, how do I get from 300 to 287? I'm going to subtract 13. And students have been practicing how to make 100 and how to get to 100, get from 100. So this is something they've been practicing. Where is our answer right now? We started with 451. We ended at 287. What we want to know is what is the distance between those two numbers? What is the difference? And this is the difference here. You see the 100, 151, 164. You can see that here. Okay, so that is another strategy for subtraction, where we're still using subtraction to find the difference, but it's a different strategy than starting at 451 and subtracting 287. This one is finding the difference between these two numbers in a different way. So the third way I want to talk about, and there's more than just these 3 ways, FYI. Kids can be flexible with numbers, and we love that as teachers, thinking about it in many different ways. So this time I want to think about the distance between 287 and 451. Now I always have to do a side note, because 4th grade strategies, 3rd grade strategies, 2nd grade strategies are all so important, even when they start using the standard algorithm for subtraction, because this concept here is how we teach subtracting mixed numbers. We use adding up, and it's really important that they understand what I'm about to show so that they understand how to do it with fractions. So there's all these connections with math that it's important for kids not to just learn the algorithms, because there is no algorithm for subtracting mixed numbers. All right, so let's get started. Again, we're finding the difference between 287 and 451. This time, you'll notice that I'm putting the same exact numbers on the number line, but instead of using subtraction, which is kind of difficult for us sometimes, for me anyways, I'd rather add up to solve. And let's see if we get the same answer. We're still trying to find the distance between these two numbers, but instead of starting at 451 and subtracting back to see what this distance is, I'm going to start at 287 and add up to see what the difference is. All right, so I talked to you about how your students been learning how to make groups of 100 for basically their whole school career. So they practice with groups of 10, they practice with groups of 100. So we know if I add 3, I'm at 290. If I add 10 more, I'm at 300, so that's adding 13. So 287 plus 13 gets us to 300. Now, this is the best about adding up. From 300 to 451, there's a pretty decent chance that your student, or students if you're the ones watching and not the parents, there's a pretty decent chance that you know how much to add to 300 to get to 451. That is why we love landmark numbers. They're so friendly, we can work with them, love them. So watch it how many steps I'm going to take this time. I'm just going to take 2 steps to, first step, jump to a landmark number. Second step, we know how much to add to get to 451. So what is the distance between 287 and 151? The distance between them is 164. 151 plus 13 is 164. So, as you know, the answer is different than the very first strategy I taught. It's up here instead of something that we land on. So when you're using the different strategies, you have to practice identifying where you find your answer. Let's look at it with equations real quick. We started with 287 plus 13 to get us to the landmark number. Always get to landmark numbers. Then we said I'm at 300. I know 151 more will get me to 451. So where is our answer here? It's how much we had to add up to get from 287 to 451. This is the distance, or the difference, between those two numbers. So we have 3 strategies that we just went over where you can find the difference between 481 and 287. There are more ways to discover. I will do one very quickly so that this video doesn't go on too long, but parents and students, if you're any way that you solve and keep track of your work is great. Double check with another strategy and make sure it makes sense. So the last thing, and I have to do this on the number line so I can see what we call a sliding scale. So if we're thinking about 451 minus 287, we're thinking about the difference here. But if I wanted to make this an easier problem, I'm going to need more space here, I might do 450 and the distance to 286. Okay, so if we're thinking about the difference from here to here, what happened was, I want to keep them the same. All I did was I subtracted 1 from 451 to 450, and then I subtracted 1 from 287 to 286. Why did I go to 450? Again, because that's a number that's easier for us to work with. Does the distance between the two numbers stay the same if I slide everything this way 1? We just want to make sure the distance is staying the same. So if I was here and I slide over 1 with both of my arms, then I'm keeping the distance between them the same. It might be easier, friends might do this because it might be easier to just say 450 minus 50 is 400, and then from there, 400 minus 236, they might be able to get 164 right away, or they might want to use adding up quickly, and that could get them there. So making an easier problem or an equivalent problem is something that students might tackle. I just wanted to throw it out there that it is a strategy you can work on, but the other ones are ones that students usually take control over. We want them to have a couple strategies in their back pocket so that they can be flexible with numbers, and also apply what they know about whole numbers to fractions in 5th grade. So this is really important that they're learning the different strategies so they can apply subtraction strategies with whole numbers to subtraction strategies with fractions and decimals. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed. If you are a fourth grader and you want to learn the standard algorithm for subtraction, there's another video for it.